Today I'm going to be talking about why the iPhone 15 was a bigger deal than we once thought. Let's get into it. Now the iPhone 15, the regular base iPhone 15, surprised me so much in terms of how much it was an upgrade from the 14. Now obviously, when we got the 14, that wasn't a really big upgrade from the 13. But when I got the 15, and I saw it on the keynote, and I saw all the upgrades they were making, I was thinking, wait a minute, this phone is actually going to be a bigger deal than we thought. It gets the A16 Bionic chip, it gets the dynamic island, and it gets the 48 megapixel camera that we got from the Pros in the previous year. And not to mention, it gets USB-C and the rounded corners that make the phone more comfortable to hold. Now, firstly, let's talk about that dynamic island coming to the iPhone 15. Now, obviously, we all knew this was going to happen eventually because, Apple always bring things for the Pros. But it definitely feels like this year, they made the iPhone 15 like a previous Pro. It has the dynamic island, it looks really nice from the front. This phone, it gets really bright, and the dynamic island just makes these phones look nice. So I'm so glad that they brought this to the regular model so that everyone can experience what a dynamic island is like, I guess, because a lot of people don't realize how much better a phone looks without a notch. I definitely say that a lot of people are going to enjoy that. Number two, USB-C being on these phones is finally nice. Now don't get me wrong, it is the same speed as Lightning, but on a phone like an iPhone 15, which isn't meant for Pros, a lot of people aren't going to be transferring loads of data over a USB-C port anyway. It's just nice to have the convenience of a USB-C port. Let's say if you have an iPad, a Mac, and an iPhone, they can all use the same port. It is a really nice thing to have. I really appreciate having USB-C on my devices, and I'm gutted that I don't have it on my 14 Pro, but that's absolutely fine. The rounded corners, number three, the rounded corners being on this phone make it so much nicer to hold. Now this phone didn't have the issues of the Pros where it was ridiculously heavy, but having those rounded corners make it way nicer to hold in the phone, and I'm honestly so glad that they did this because it's something that I didn't realize I needed, but now it's here, I really appreciate it. Lastly, the 48 megapixel camera. I was not really expecting them to bring this to the phone, to the regular iPhone 15 that quickly. Like, it's one of those things where you don't expect it because it has been so recent. Now, obviously it's not the same exact 48 megapixel camera that's in the 14 Pro, but the software makes sure that the 48 megapixel camera on the 15 is still up to standard. And you definitely notice that. You finally get a 2x button on your regular 15, which sort of acts like a telephoto lens for you to have, because obviously on the iPhone 15s, you only get a wide and an ultra wide. So it's definitely nice to have that on the phone and to be able to crop in a little bit without you losing any of that quality. Now, you don't necessarily have to use that button. It is all software, and you're still going to notice that there is a little bit of loss in quality, but other than that, I definitely say that it is nice to have that finally on the phone. Now the A16 Bionic chip being in this thing is a very big deal because obviously the previous year we got two of the chips in the same release. Like we got the iPhone 13 that got the A15 Bionic, and then we got the iPhone 14 that got the A15 Bionic, and we finally got the A16 Bionic in this regular 15. Now this chip is obviously very powerful. It was in the 14 Pros, and it is honestly a ridiculously good chip. But a lot of people aren't going to notice it, especially when this thing is having to power a 60 Hz display and it's having to power when it's having to power a 60 Hz display, because it is definitely going to make sure that you get more battery life. And as we see here in Mr. Who's the Boss video, yeah, the iPhone 15 Plus is the champion of battery because it doesn't have that 120 Hz display. It doesn't need as much battery, it doesn't stack up as much performance. So you definitely notice that this phone can definitely sip battery instead of draining it. Now, this is the question. Now, when I made my iPhone 14 video, I said in it that if you have if you're having to choose between the 14 and 13, definitely go for 13. But my mind has changed slightly. I would not say to someone now, if they're looking to upgrade, I would definitely say for them to get the 15. Now, for all the reasons I mentioned, and just because you get that new design, and I think it is a very good upgrade this year. Mainly because of the new chip. Before it didn't make sense because they're the same chip. This year, it's a different chip and it's a bigger upgrade. Now, definitely go for this phone if you have something like an 11 or a 10. You're going to notice the changes and you will appreciate them more. If you already have an iPhone 12 or you have an iPhone 13 or 14, I wouldn't really say you need to upgrade. You're not going to notice anything that major, and you don't really need the slight improvements. Unless you really want USB-C, then that's the only time you're going to need it, to be honest. I would definitely say that the iPhone 13 and 14 do not need to be upgraded. Like, especially if you've just got them, do not bother getting an iPhone 15 because you're not going to appreciate the slight differences. Whereas if we look at the iPhone 11's bezels and the iPhone 15's bezels, someone like that is going to notice the differences because of the thickness of the bezels, the notch, and it's just honestly a way nicer phone. Now this is the thing, the regular consumers that are going to be getting these iPhone 15s and the things like the iPhone 11, they're going to be upgrading. They're not upgrading as often anymore. They're not upgrading every 2 years, they're upgrading every 3 or 4 years. So Apple knows this. They're making micro upgrades every year that add up overall for the people that are coming from the older iPhones to the new iPhones, and they're noticing those big changes. And for a lot of people that don't upgrade regularly, these changes are massive and they've never had them before. So this is why it makes sense for Apple to do these smaller changes, because regular consumers don't notice things like chipset, 120Hz displays, way better cameras, a telephoto camera. They don't notice these things, so it doesn't matter about not having them. And that's why Apple put off USB-C for a long time, because they didn't think that regular consumers were going to need it. But now USB-C is here. Obviously it's the way better port, but honestly, I definitely say if you're considering getting an iPhone 15 and you've got anything below an iPhone 12, definitely go right ahead and buy it. It's honestly a really solid phone. And if you're considering either getting a 15 or a 15 Plus, just look at what your needs are. Definitely consider getting, a 15 Pro if you're looking at that similar price match to an iPhone 15 Plus, because they're so similar in price that it kind of, that jump from the 15 Plus to the 15 Pro is sort of worth it. So definitely do consider it. But my personal recommendation is to definitely get the iPhone 15 because of all the big upgrades that I have mentioned. But it's been Harry. I'm out.